and welcome to One on One on Afro Worldview. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalani. Now, today we're joined by the President of the Republic of Namibia, His Excellency President Hage Geingob. President, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Now, President, it's all about BRICS right now. It will be for the rest of the year. The big question beyond South Africa's gain is, what does the continent and particularly the SADC region stand to gain in participating in BRICS in any form?
Well, first let me thank President Cyril Ramaphosa and South African people for having us here, and also to congratulate you for having a new name, new Afrocentric approach. So we hope you will be covering all of Africa. That's already in sync with what we are going to talk about, that you are going to cover Africa, to be inclusive. So all these BRICS or SADC, AU, we are talking about inclusivity, whether it's the United Nations. As you know, we are talking about the reform of United Nations Security Council. So that Africa must also have a seat there with veto powers. So the same is true with BRICS. BRICS is a South-South cooperation. When we were negotiating with the European Union, some of us, South Africa, Namibia, and Angola, were alone in trying to talk about South-South cooperation. So thanks God, today we have now BRICS, and it's dealing about South-South cooperation. Within these BRICS, we have big powers. We have Russia, we have China, we have Brazil, India, and Africa is represented by South Africa. So South Africa must be supported so that we can have African position that South Africa can put forth in the BRICS meetings. That's why President Cyril Ramaphosa was very wise to invite us to have outreach with African countries during this context of the meeting of the BRICS. What we are trying to look for is really to address the issue of inequality. We have now political stability, we have democracy, but people want now to have shelter, they want to have food, they want to have clothing, they want to have clinics. And that means it's a second phase of the struggle. And if even BRICS have now their bank, I hope this bank is different from other Bretton Woods banks, where there is conditionality. So if we have a development bank basically coming from BRICS, we hope that it will be different so that we can industrialize in Africa. We have to add value to our raw materials. We have been having resources, they go out in the raw form, their value is added in Europe, and then we buy our own goods. Now that we can stop if we can add value to our own things and by industrializing. And also facing this artificial intelligence, robotics. That means labor as we knew it is going to be different. So it's a rebooting, it's a retooling and so on. So this opportunity given to us is great, that we can have one-on contact with big powers and see how we can actually manufacture in Africa so that we can add value to our raw materials.
I love, President, that you were quick to raise the conditionality when you speak of perhaps the investment into the various countries, because you're the incoming chair, actually, of SADC. Now, the big question becomes, is there great appreciation of SADC as a region at the negotiating table as opposed to individual GDPs here? Do you think that we are beginning to understand that we wield more power as a region as opposed to, say, South Africa's GDP, or perhaps as an emerging economy as well, as Namibia, standing on roughly $27 billion of a GDP? Do you think we are stronger as a region?
South Africa is aware of that. Namibia is aware of that. AU is aware of that. That's why we're talking about regional cooperation, the RECs, Regional Economic Commissions, so that we can harmonize our resources to pull together in the same direction. We have a principle I use in Namibia is saying harambe, meaning pulling in the same direction. Whether it is in the individual countries or Southern Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, we have strength in unity. If we talk with one voice, and if we have a powerful countries, industrialized countries, more developed than some others, if they are held under the wings by South Africa, for instance, that we go and negotiate, and South Africa is not chairing, they are there in BRICS, we have more power, and we may get more if we are together. Unity is always a strength.
So powerful, and you've actually gotten to demonstrate such by signing the free trade area. You were part of the 11 that shunned it at first. We take it you had to consider a lot within your country, but we've got other countries on the continent that felt, well, possibly those with a stronger manufacturing hub stand to benefit more, but you are saying we can go underneath the wing. Whomever is stronger, we're still willing to be part of this trade area.
Well, the issue is South Africa's approach. When we were negotiating with the European Union, we were just talking about that. It's not a small country or big country. We remain three of us alone. Other countries signed. And we said we must go together, we must stand together. So definitely in unity there is strength. And the way we cooperate in Southern Africa and also in the rest of Africa, now let me put it that way, I think if Africa can stand together, big and small, as one, at UN, everywhere, we'll win.
Let's talk about your relationship with China. You visited China a bit earlier on in the year, and yours was to elevate relations, particularly to a more strategic partnership. Where does that relationship stand right now?
Well, when we were elevated to that level, comprehensive strategic partnership, I asked the question, what do we mean by that? Let me unpack it myself. And I said, strategic means we are serious, and comprehensive means we can discuss anything. But these days, the world say that, but sometimes when it comes to their own interest, they do it alone. I saw just recently what happened with the United States and North Korea. Here we have been sanctioned, some of us, some of the countries, by the United States, that we are dealing with North Korea. But all of a sudden, the President Trump goes and says, a good man, and so on. It hurt me. Some people know how to deal with nuclear weapons. Some, because they are small or they are black, do not know how to handle these things. But we all went to education in the United States and so on. We all can use our brains. But this thing of being looked down upon, that we can only resolve maybe if we stand together. And really I'm glad how we, South Africa, the rest of Africa, Southern Africa, stand together. Wherever we go, we stand together and talk with one voice.
But there's criticism, in as much as there's this wave of positivity around BRICS, there's also criticism. There have been protests where some are saying that this is a festival of big business, where deals will be signed that will have profound impact on the working class here. That how much are we really giving as investment comes to the various countries? What is your take on that conversation right now?
The issue, I'll answer it by quoting Chinese. When I went to China before the last time you are referring to, I saw all these capitalistic things. So I said, oh, comrades, what's happening? I see America is here. Then they said, yes, we have opened up 30 years ago. But whoever comes here comes on our terms. And that is a problem in Africa. People are coming on their terms to Africa. We allow them. So whoever comes, big or small, to South Africa, to Namibia, we must put our conditions. We told Chinese, when you come to Namibia, don't bring ordinary wheelbarrow pushers. We have high unemployment.
Yes, it must be specialized skills.
Specialized skills we don't have. And don't come and compete with Namibians. Come and invest. The difference between investing and coming to set up small shops and compete with us. So I was very straight, and I will be straight with anybody. When you come to invest, like they come to invest in uranium, That's investment.
Let's talk about manufacturing in Namibia. You are heavily reliant on the extraction and processing of mineral resources. Many of us don't play in that value-added space, and you just touched on it a bit earlier, that we all need to grow the manufacturing sector. What has hindered the growth thereof in Namibia specifically?
Well, firstly, Namibia, second to South Africa, is maybe one of the most unequal countries in the world. And that means some people were left out, some were in business maybe. And manufacturing means that you must also own something. You must own what you are going to manufacture. You must have the skills to do that. So blacks were left out. Now what we are doing therefore is that we were just, in South Africa also added to that because we're very dependent on South Africa. Everything was coming from here, even the food stuff. So to manufacture, you have to definitely first have people to be trained in vocational training. We have said vocational training is now number one to us. Germany was built by artisans, not by PhDs. PhDs do not build countries. It's true they have ideas, but
yes, they identify the problem, but
they
somebody else might solve it.
So artisans, I tell people when this light goes out, I have PhD, but I cannot do anything with it. But somebody will come in. But we must hold gens, don't throw away the PhDs. We need each other. But we have to have vocational training, people who will use their hands to create things. That's what we need. So manufacturing is a thing. All countries in the world, you have to industrialize. Now industrialization, of course, means manufacturing, and therefore to add value to our resources.
You talk of an unequal society. We are seized with land reform as South Africa right now. You're seeing how it's unfolding. You're also seized with a very problem. Yours is now twofold, or you've got two strategies. It's that of resettlement, and it's that of transferring of commercially viable land. Now, resettlement is obviously driven by government, but the transfer of land then is more private, willing buyer, willing seller. I read through your Article 16 of just compensation. We have had to deal with that, and we're now having a broader debate about the willing buyer, willing seller. Any perhaps view on how we're handling it and how you plan to handle yours going forward?
Now, first, the situations are always similar. We have a similar situation where you have some people who came and settled. You talk about settler colonies, that's Zimbabwe, Namibia, and South Africa, where the white people came to settle. And unlike in West Africa, was an indirect rule. They were saying UK and ruling. But here, white people came to settle. Now, when we were drafting our constitution, Western countries thought, after Mozambique and Angola's independence, that these countries fell into the hands of communists. So they thought where their kith and kin are, where they settled in Namibia and South Africa and Zimbabwe, they showed interest to see that maybe they're going to protect the rights of the whites there. So in Namibia's case, all of a sudden Western contact group, as they call themselves, came to now involve themselves to negotiate independence of Namibia. 5 Western countries. And that thing went on for a long time. But immediately they drafted what they call constitutional principles, which now gave the parameters of under which you are going to draft your constitution. And primary thing there was property rights. Now the land is never mentioned in our constitution. Land is only mentioned once. It comes to traditional leaders, how they have to handle land, which is a state land. So the land was put in property rights in our country, property rights, which means commercial farms, everything is a property. And therefore you cannot just come and grab somebody's property. I agree with that. I also didn't like when I heard people grabbing the land somewhere else. But idea is we cannot have an inequality and sit with our hands folded. And we said in Namibia, I'm saying to my fellow white people, look, I had political power. We had that, and therefore we reconciled. Politically, we embrace you, but meet us halfway when it comes to economy, land that you control. Meet us halfway so that as brothers, hold hands and pull in the same direction.
What has been the reception?
Oh, terrible. Sometimes people thought when you talk about reconciliation that you are talking out of the position of weakness, that they need us after all. That white privilege kind of a situation. So anyway, we started now not to grab people's land or whatever property, to now buy the land. We thought, and one thing I must also state is that it's true, 100 years ago, Germans or whoever came and stole the land. Yes, they stole the land. But on that land, after 50 years, there's a white boy. And I was born at a farm too, with a white guy. We're good friends. So he is equally a Namibian too, because he was born on that soil, and I was born there. But the difference is he owns that farm, I don't own it. So we are saying, therefore, since we are both Namibians, we must coexist, but let's share the land also. Not only land, other things too, so that we can coexist.
But have you moved, President, from the position of saying we cannot buy the land? Because sometimes the fiscus can no longer absorb it.
No.
So have you moved from that position?
Well, we are moving. Once we are buying, the prices went up. The prices went up because there is a demand, therefore supply. But now we have a land conference. We decided we are using a different way. I had a land conference in 1991. That conference didn't touch the ancestral land question. It didn't also, it endorsed the willing buyer, willing seller principle. That time, in 91. Now, it's not working, people are saying. People are angry. And we are saying, okay, I'm calling a second land conference, October. That conference is going to discuss everything. It must be inclusive discussions. And I'm inviting the white people, I'm inviting everybody. And they're right now, they are going all over the country to have town hall meetings, to sensitize people. Papers, there's a call for papers, scholars can write. So that time we are going to discuss everything. And willing buyer, willing seller principle is going to be judged as having failed. What do we do next? Now, Constitution allows us to not confiscate, but to expropriate the land with just compensation. Now, we started, even in that conference, we said, all of us agreed, including white people who were influential, Derek March and them, to say absentee land owners, land must be taken. We didn't do that as government, we failed.
Okay.
Now that's a thing to start with, because there is already a consensus that time. So look at the absentee, and a lot of the land is owned by absentee land owners who just come for 15 days to hunt and go back to Europe.
And they fenced all that land?
Fenced off. It's a private property. People have been kicked out. They don't even have mercy. People who have been working there for maybe a bond there, 30 years, come and kick them out in the street. We cannot allow that.
But President, do you really believe that those who are benefiting from a system or the status quo will so easily relinquish that land through a conversation?
Well, you see, you do things. This world is now a small place. It's a global village. Whatever you do here in South Africa, Namibia, others are watching. I was surprised that Her Majesty the Queen, when we were meeting, raised the issue. We had copies from South Africa to talk about scorecards and so on, and talk about black economic empowerment, but with different name. And there was a clause for 25% to be ceded to previously disadvantaged. It was interpreted as saying we're taking from the rich, meaning the whites, and give it to the poor. And the Queen indirectly raised that issue, and I was surprised. Lobbying already in European capitals that we want to grab something from the white people. But the issue is that our white brothers to coexist together must smell the coffee. People are getting angry, and therefore we as leaders are still controlling them. And we are saying, let's do it together so that we all can, we have to live together. We don't have alternative. But let's solve this problem together. And what I'm doing is even to appeal to them. They must see that there is a danger somewhere. Those of us who are old will go very soon, and the young people are angry. They're not going to be like us. So while we are still there, maybe, let's meet, hold hands, and address this issue. Address it honestly and find a solution. We have to coexist.
You sought guidance or advice from the former president, Mr. Robert Mugabe. You seem to hold you hold him in high regard. Talk to me about that relationship and the decision to perhaps seek his guidance on this matter around land reform.
No, it was misunderstood. I don't know what happened. It was sarcasm. I respected him. I respect him. He was a revolutionary. And from the word go, even we were in this building, last meeting, he told people, he said he's not going to follow Zimbabwe when we are in this building. And of course, diplomacy, I just said, yeah, Mr. President, I heard it from you too. You also said it's a different set of events that made you to grab the land or whatever it is. Ours is different. So therefore, we are saying we're going to do it our own way, in Namibian way. So I didn't go for advice. I was on a state visit. And therefore, we were making speeches. And I said, yes, we are learning, and we are learning from how they have handled it. What were the consequences? Maybe unintended consequences. We cannot repeat that. So that's what I'm saying. Maybe if people are saying, I went to ask for advice. Long time ago when President Mugabe came, immediately after they took that action, I was there, cornered. And I said, we have the Constitution. We are going to follow our Constitution. That was that time, to follow willing buyer, willing seller principle. Now it's about 28 years. I must now throw it back to people and listen to them. Because I also see we have to move on. We cannot have society that is unequal. Inequality is growing, and I cannot govern a country like that. It's not fair. It's not fair to the whites, it's not fair to the black, to tell the truth. So therefore, I believe that we can hold hands. The white people or whoever owns property, not only white. Yeah, we must also be careful. Also, maybe blacks who became rich, all of us who instantly became rich because we were empowered politically, must sit and we must discuss it together and find one another. We must hold hands. We have to live together.
You talk of Afrocentrism, or perhaps this wave of Pan-Africanism that we're seeing now, especially emerging from young people. There was an era where a number of African leaders were vilified. And now young people are going back in history and saying, these were probably our heroes because this is what we want. If there were compromises made, young people are coming out and saying, we want our land, we want to participate in the economy. What do you make of this sudden change? Is there perhaps danger in it where we have young revolutionaries now saying, let us correct the narrative, that you painted certain African leaders as dictators when they were fighting for something that was not endorsed by Europeans perhaps, or their position on the politics of Africa was not necessarily endorsed by Europeans?
Well, I have a different take on that. You see, we had extraordinary personalities, those founding fathers. They were therefore regarded as demigods, so to say, because they were really extraordinary personalities. Sekou Toure's, Kwame Nkrumah, and ours in this area too. Then you had a second wave, one-party state, the coups and so on. Now we're in a third wave, I think, whereby, the way I say it, we must not think of personality, not a big man. We must think of processes, systems, and institutions. Even if people are gone, those are going to be there to buttress our democracy. And that's the lasting way that we are now, I think all of us in this part are engaging in. We are not the big guys, the strong men, because the people are not strong. They're not strong because they are strong. It's a stature. Mandela is big and strong. He was Mandela. Sam Nujoma was strong. Those were founding fathers. I am not Sam Nujoma, I'm not Mandela. So we have a different approach now. We are that layer of leaders who will talk about processes, systems, and institutions. So don't look at me. Let's create the system, processes that we together and young people can come into.
Policies that will outlive you.
That will, surely. And that way we can decide together. It's democracy now. Before there was no democracy. One party state or military coup, and extraordinary personalities were above. Now we are equal. People talk to us as human beings.
There we are. Here we are. We're talking.
See,
I even forgot I'm talking to a president.
You see, that's the point. And it should be that way. It should be that way. We try to do away with paraphernalia, which comes, it's trappings of the office, of course. We're going to do otherwise. But we must lay it down. We're not gods on earth. We must therefore be simple. I'm not that simple. People say I'm very, but the issue is be reachable. And it's a system, a processes, electoral process. If it is there, it must be transparently done. It must be inclusivity. Inclusivity spells harmony. Exclusivity, conflict. Anyway, you exclude one group, one class, one race, you have conflict. And Africa has been going through that all these years. Inclusivity, and transparency plus accountability spells trust. Now you young people have lost trust in us because we are not transparent, we are not accountable. So I have a formula, mathematical one, I say, so A plus T plus equals now TR. Transparency plus accountability equals TR, meaning trust. And people have lost trust in leadership. We want to rebuild that. The president is doing that here. So that's what to do. Hold hands, we must work together. Listen to the young people, that's the future. That's the future, and of course they have a style, you can have a good idea, but how you put it can destroy the good idea. So that's the only difference I have. You don't have to insult to make a point. But we are together. Women, you cannot leave out the women. The youth, you cannot leave out. We are aware of that. We don't disagree, but why fight? I had young people, they were about to cause trouble in Namibia. It could have been serious. I was new in the office. And I called them in. We sat for 6 hours. And I said, comrades, land is what Swapo fought for. We agree. We disagree on modalities. Let's therefore sit down and solve it. Fine. At least we have peace so far because of that. But people are still waiting. And they also think land is panacea. It is not. In Namibia, for instance, dry country, it's not easy to farm. So the other way you can put it is, if you are to industrialize and urbanize, like South Africa, and people have jobs, are they still going to ask for land? Or is it because of poverty and joblessness that makes them to ask for land, thinking it can make them to get rich?
It's a pertinent question. President, thank you very much for your time. A very great way to close it, where he says inclusivity spells harmony, but exclusivity will then spell conflict. That's where we leave it for today. Have a great one.